Hello, my name is Dr. Daniel Van Ingen, and this is Dr. Sarah van Ingen. Welcome to the Parenting Doctor Show. It is Friday night. We're so happy to join you. We're just starting out, and this is another great Friday night. We're very excited to be with you. So here we are. It's the Parenting Doctor Show, and we have a special treat for you tonight. And as parents begin to join us, we have a great show. I am again privileged to be joined by Dr. Sarah van Ingen, and she is an educator. She's a math professor, math education professor, and she has some great ideas on what we can do for um, for kids and learning. So we're going to get into the education of our children.
That's right. Yep. So before we start, one of the things that Dan and I really want to stress in our parenting doctors community is that there's no one right way to raise a child, and the same things don't work for every child. So we're going to offer some suggestions tonight, some ways of thinking about things, but always know that there's going to be multiple ways to approach every situation. And we want to have a community where there is no judgment and a lot of just joy and camaraderie among parents. Okay, so let's start.
All right. So, what would you say, Dr. Van Ingen, is the most important thing with regards to education of our children?
Right. Well, when you think of like the whole purpose of education, so the purpose of education is to help our children develop the gifts that they have inside of them. So, they're unfortunately in the West, schooling has come to sort of have a lot to do with some sort of measure of one type of intelligence, and it can often be very limiting. But the whole purpose to education is that kids can learn how to express themselves and to develop the gifts that they have to, contribute to society, to bless the people around them. So that's the ultimate purpose to education. And in order to make that happen, it's really important that children develop a love of learning.
So we have three children, ages 11, 9, and then a younger one who's 4. And why don't we share, Sarah, how much we value grades? Do we value grades in our family?
Okay, right. So, we take somewhat of an odd approach for maybe people of 2 doctorates, but we really don't care about grades, like pretty much at all. So, that's not to say we don't care about the learning. And so, grades can be an indicator, right? So, if one of our children comes home with a low grade, it's not that we ignore it. That low grade can tell us something, perhaps a child's. Didn't learn what they needed to, but we certainly don't put pressure or emphasis on the grades themselves. If you think about it, grades are almost meaningless. It's all about the learning of the child.
Right.
That is what we care about.
Yes.
And so we're not going to express disappointment in a child like, I can't believe you got a 60%. I'll start out the conversation with, I see a 60%. Let's look at the items that you got wrong here and let's just talk about it. I wonder if these are things that you didn't know, if you think they were just minor, like careless mistakes, if you misunderstood the problem. Like, I'm going to want to understand why there was a 60%, but I'm certainly not going to ever express to the child like disappointment, or upset about a low score, because the whole point is they're learning. So I'm going to show them that I'm really intent and they're learning. Now, the child may not like that. Like, they just might want to go forget about the test or run off and play. So it's not that I am just trying to build the child up like, oh, you're always great, right? That's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is very much to reinforce I care about the learning of the material and not just some grading. And by the way, parents, grading is so arbitrary. So when I work with teachers, sometimes I give a whole room full of teachers a test to grade, an assessment. Even though like math, which you would think is sort of more black and white, or it typically has a reputation. And no joke, every time I do this, teachers will grade that same test from an A to a D. Like some teachers grade the test an A, and the same exact test, some teachers grade it a D. And it just has to do with the teacher's philosophy. Do they get partial credit or not? There's so many things. So I do want to say that too, that just because a child gave a 60 doesn't necessarily mean they only know 60% of the material. It may even mean that they know less than the material. But grading, there is a lot of arbitrariness in grading. So that's another thing to sort of keep in mind. And why we as parents can investigate deeper into like why scores might be low.
So let me ask you this. So parents are going to want to know what to do if kids are not doing their homework.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What would you say to parents here tonight, or watching our show and want to know what to do if kids are not doing their homework?
Right. Well, this is a big one, and it's somewhat age dependent, right? So with younger children, like early elementary children, they are really just learning how to be sort of responsible and to engage in homework. And so I think that there's a lot of like hand holding.
Yeah.
And even sometimes I think we might even get into a situation where we have to do some like positive reinforcement. So in general, we want our children to understand that while they're children, their job is schooling. We have jobs that we go to, but their job is schooling. And so they need to put their focus and their energy into it. And so we wouldn't like reward them. We don't believe in giving like money for good test scores or money for homework or something like that. But sometimes when you have really young children and you're trying to teach them the discipline of sort of coming home and doing homework, there might be ways that you do reinforce, right? Very simple one would be, we don't play games, friends don't come over or whatever until we get the homework done.
Right.
Now, I'll put a caveat to that. Schools often are not developmentally appropriate for young children, meaning they ask young children to sit in seats pretty motionless for long stretches of time, probably longer than is developmentally appropriate.
Okay.
So if you have a younger child, like a elementary age child, who's coming home and really putting up a fight about doing homework, and you're saying homework has to be done before play, you might consider really giving them like a good hour of free play time, and then trying the homework. And still you can have a reinforcement after that. But children need to move.
Yeah.
And schools are not very friendly right now to that.
Particularly boys.
Yeah, but I would say both. And it really depends on the child.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What we're saying learning is most important and grades don't matter. What do parents do if a child fails a test?
Right. So, that's what we were sort of chatting about. If the child fails a test, I think the parents' first line of thought is, let's figure out why they failed the test. And there's so many reasons. Of course, maybe it's the child didn't study. Maybe it's the child did study but was studying the wrong things or never really understood the material. Maybe it was the child was misunderstanding the items. Maybe it was the child was careless instead of not thinking or not focusing during the test.
Yeah.
So we gotta sit down with the child and really ask them about the items on the test, try to explore and figure out what was going on. Now sometimes that can be hard when kids have multiple choice tests. It can be actually hard, so you may even have to ask the teacher for a copy of the test or the original questions. But so if they fail the test, first thing is just to sit down with the child and figure it out. Now, if it turns out the child really doesn't know the material and is confused about the material, then you got to probe a little deeper. See if they had notes that explained it, if they had a textbook that explained it, or if these were things that they were mainly getting in class from the teacher. And then sort of based on that, you're doing a little bit of triaging. So if the child is older, of course, we want the child to talk to the teacher. But sometimes parents, we do need to advocate for our children. Teachers have a lot of children that they're dealing with, and so sometimes there is appropriate time for a parent to ask for a meeting with a teacher, and then to try to discuss what's going on with the test and from the teacher's perspective what might be happening. So that's a piece that the parent can do. you have a lot of thoughts just with interpersonal communication. So do you have any thoughts to share with us about when like a parent is first approaching that conversation with the teacher, ways to do it that might be more productive versus less productive?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I see in youth sports is how parents sometimes approach the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And often parents may approach the coach initially with some criticism. It's helpful when coaches hear positive because so often they're hearing negative first. And when feedback is packaged in positive, that's really helpful. You got to imagine that a teacher, or not imagine, we all know that teachers work all day long trying to manage a whole lot of personalities, a whole lot of learning, trying to fit the curriculum. There's just a lot going on. They're underpaid, overstressed, and feeling it. But it doesn't mean that we can't advocate for our child. Teachers love it. Don't teachers, Sarah, love it when parents are invested? I think just some positive is important. But due to time, let me just get to this next question. It seems like over the decades, things have changed from love of learning to now an overemphasis on grades and test scores. What's your opinion on high stakes test scores?
Right, so here in the state of Florida, we have the FSA. It's sort of our standardized high stakes test, and just around the country, every state has these. And, I want to believe there was a best of intention behind the original idea, which was we want to know if children are learning the standards that we set out that we think are appropriate for that grade level.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, the way this testing system is carried out has been really difficult on students and teachers.
Yeah.
And has really emphasized performance over like love of learning or even long-term learning skills.
And teachers are teaching towards the tests.
Yeah, that happens too. Exactly. It's sort of we say it narrows the curriculum. It sort of reduces what teachers are teaching just based on the testing.
When I was speaking in Wisconsin, a second grader was told by a teacher or told by their parents, if you don't do well in this test in the morning, you're not going to get into the third grade. The kid went to school and was in tears.
Yeah.
And the teacher had to say, no, that's not true. So I'm sharing this story in another state when I was speaking, and someone in the front row where I was speaking says, yes, it is true. So there's the pressure is everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And there really are times where those high-stake tests are used to place children. And that's, from a measurement perspective, from an assessment perspective, it's just bad practice. So we know that best practice would be to make big decisions like that, like on grade placement, based on multiple assessments. So there's just some really unfair practices. All that to say, I really hope that parents can minimize the pressure of these high-stakes tests.
So as parenting doctors, our goal is to get cutting-edge laser beam points. And a key golden point here, take-home message is for parents to minimize the test.
Yes. Yes.
Okay?
I mean,
do your best, forget the rest, do your best, but minimize.
Yeah.
It's
right. Maximal attention onto learning.
Okay.
Asking your child, did you contribute to class today? What were the things that you were learning about? But not even, what did you learn about today? And the child says, oh, I don't know. Or how was school? Fine, right? So we can't ask those big questions, but really ask them, okay, well, what was something that you didn't know going into your science class today that you knew going out of it, right?
Okay.
Or what was something that really puzzled you in with the novel that you're reading?
Yes.
Or what thing are you learning in math right now that you really like, and what thing are you learning that you really don't like, right?
Yeah.
So those are more specific questions. Anyways, emphasize the child's engagement in the content. Do not, if I can be so bold as to say do not, because we rarely do that, but I really would say do not sort of add to the pressure of the test. It's really important that you do really well. The kids hear that from so many places. So I really think one of the things we can do to support the whole child is to is to say, you know what, I really care about your learning, and so you're going to give your best on the test, but that's not the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me is your learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's an old acronym I liked learning many years ago, CANI, CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. But it's the love of learning, and we want to get our children moving towards loving to learn. So this is great, Dr. Sarah. This is important. I think this is very important for families, and so we hope that some of these messages are helpful to you. Any final words?
I would say when it comes to thinking about what you can do at home to support your child's learning, foster curiosity. Let your child see you be curious about the ideas that they're learning. Encourage your child to be curious about the ideas, to ask really good questions. I always tell my children that the greatest thinkers and inventors are often the people who just ask a lot of questions. So I would say foster that. Foster perseverance. So it's like initial performance is not nearly as important as perseverance. And so we want to really honor and praise children for pressing in when something is not easy for them, versus just praising them for getting like the A's or the B's. It's those like characteristics of how the children are learning that will pay off for them so much in the long run. And I would say also parents, like, really try to control your own anxiety about like what college my child will go into, sort of like those big long-term things. Deal with that yourself. Talk to your spouse about it, your friend about it, but it's too much to put pressure on young children, sort of about like how this might affect the middle school they get into, and how that might affect the high school they get into, and how that might affect the college they get into. It really puts like it's like an external control, and what's gonna fuel that child learning most in the long run is an internal drive, a love of discovering new things, which is where curiosity and perseverance, those are two really important characteristics. So I would say do what you can to foster curiosity and perseverance.
I love that idea of fostering curiosity and perseverance. It reminds me of some of Carol Dweck's research at Stanford, where she talks about the importance of reinforcing the growth mindset in our children. And so by drawing attention to their perseverance and their curiosity, it reinforces that growth mindset. If we just say, you're a Johnson, you're a good speller, or listen, you're a Williams. You know, our family, we're just not good at math. You know, as if it's a genetic thing versus we all with effort. And so by emphasizing, this goes along with what Dr. Sarah said, by emphasizing the learning, the process, as opposed to just the A, the grade. Does that make sense?
Yep. Sounds great.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was great having you, and we'll see you again next week at the Parenting Doctor Show. Check us out at parentingdoctors.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our newsletter for all the latest research and latest information from the Parenting Doctors. And check me out on Tuesday at 1 p.m. at the Dr. Van Ingen Clinical Psychology and Parenting Show. All right.
All right. Bye.